The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, thank you for joining this MDA webinar. My name is Carmelo Cinqueonce, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Dental Association. Today's webinar is entitled, Why You Must Own Post-COVID-19, The Key to Your Financial Future. Our presenters are Charles Loretto and Hillary Harms Becchetti. Charles joined Kane Waters and Associates in 2001 and became partner in 2016. He plays a critical role in growing the firm's client base as the Director of Business Development, Marketing, and New Client Services. He regularly speaks to dental students in residency programs, study clubs, dental symposiums, and state and national dental meetings. Since 2004, Charles has presented to over 30,000 dentists in 51 dental schools. He is a published author and host of the top-ranking dental podcast, Transition Talk. Charles oversees the Practice Transition Department for CWA and is founder of the affiliate company National Dental Placements that assists doctors in the buying, transitioning, and valuation of a practice. He and his team help hundreds of clients and non-clients with their transition goals annually. Hillary Harms Becchetti is owner and CEO of Pine Lake Dental Law and Transitions. Hillary grew up in the world of dentistry. Both of her parents are dentists. Her first job was working in her parents' dental office, and almost every family vacation was wherever the ADA conference happened to be that year. Through her law firm, Hillary counsels and represents dentists in practice transitions and acquisitions, employment agreements, general employment law issues, leases, estate planning, prenuptial agreements, and conflict management. She is a licensed attorney in Minnesota and South Dakota. All attendee lines.
And now Wisconsin.
All attendee lines will remain muted. Although lines are muted, you will notice a button at the bottom of your screen or to the right-hand side that allows you to ask a question. We will attempt to address questions at the end of the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. And if we do not get to some questions, we will collect them and we will be able to answer them at a later time. At this time, I will turn the webinar over to our presenters. Charles, the webinar is yours. Thank you.
Well, I didn't recognize this at first, but this is like an all-Italian staff here. We got the Loretto's, the Becchettis, the Carmendos. I feel like we're running a pizza organization here, man. Oh, man. Well, I appreciate the invitation, and Hillary, certainly glad to see you again. I know we had a chance to meet at the MDA just this past year when I was there. And I was sad to see that we didn't get a chance to go there this year. I know it's been difficult for myself that I've been on the road for the last 10 plus years going to dental meetings. I had, I think, 8 trips scheduled between March and April at Hinman or at the AAE meeting. And so it's just a unique kind of time that I think we're all living in. But the reality is life will go on. Being a business owner will go on. Being a dentist, you're still going to have patients that are going to need your services. You'll still need attorneys that will, you'll need their services in this case to assist with all your legal aspects of becoming an owner. And so this lecture that I have been presenting on, it's called the Why You Must Own speech. I've literally, as Carmelo graciously did the introduction, I've been to dental schools all across the country. I've been, kind of the main speaker at ASDA or the National Leader Conference, a lot of these big meetings. And I think when you look around dentistry, especially organized dentistry, there is this just negativity that is just sitting there. And it's about, unfortunately, it's about how corporate dentistry is kind of coming into our space and taking over. And, I can't do it. I'm $500,000 in debt. I don't have the clinical experience. Maybe I'll just go work for this person. And so that inspired, over the years, just kind of seeing this transition, inspired kind of this speech. And I guess it's something that's really kind of taken a life of its own. And so what I wanted to do is basically update that speech with, 5 reasons you must own, post-COVID, because I do think that things are going to be different. They're already different. And so that's what we wanted to touch on today. So Hillary and I are going to go back and forth. She's going to certainly give her insight, being an attorney there with boots on the ground and the certainly the state of Minnesota and her surrounding states that she works at, and she can give her insight to some of these things that we're going to be presenting on. And so we've had a couple of conversations already, and we're just going to kind of interject with each other here, and we'll take this thing all the way through. And then according to the iPhone, I've got 12:06 Dallas time, the same as your time. I'll take us all the way through to that 1:00 p.m. Time, and then from there we will take on your questions. So definitely inspire you to, as you have questions, to start thinking about them and to get those kind of prepared as far as what you want to write in. And then Carmelo is going to be able to read those off, and then we'll just kind of take turns back and forth with how we get those addressed. So do our best just to inspire you and to let you know that certainly we've got some unique times here, but I'm actually really excited about the future. Certainly something I know you can kind of expand on here, Hillary, but our transition business right now is absolutely, it took a little bit of a pause, like people were scared, but I am telling you, people are engaged. My sellers are engaged. My buyers are still engaged, that they still want to move forward, in purchasing the practice. They're a little unsure how it's going to work, but as far as their verbal kind of, I need to do this, I know that's what I'm seeing on the global market. Hillary, what you want to expand a little bit on the local market there as well?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I mean, I feel like this was a catalyst to kind of push people in one direction. For sellers, a lot of people were planning on retiring for years, and then suddenly like, oh, yep, okay, I'm done. Like, so this is a catalyst for them to sell. Same thing with buyers. I have a lot of clients who are associates and they don't know if they have a job. And so now they're like, well, I've been thinking about buying a practice for a while. I'm going to start looking. And I have clients that have, are in the process right now. And even though, yes, things are definitely paused, they're still excited to own down the road. And those are still moving forward, just slowly but surely, until we reopen again. But it's, once we reopen again, it's going to be, all systems go. So it's still going. And yes, we definitely took a pause and had to shift gears. I had a lot of employment law questions the last few weeks, but yeah, it's still going for sure. And I'm still getting new clients every day. So
So one of the things I want, sometimes the young person that is nervous about, becoming the business owner because, hey, I don't have any business experience. I just need to let you know, like the previous 6 generations of dentists, 7 generations of dentists, they didn't have business experience either. I'm absolutely telling you without question that you can do it. I mean, Kane Waters has over 2,200 dental clients all across the country. Our average general dentist, and that's average. If you think you're average, then this is a good average. They do $1.3 million of collections. They make over $550,000 a year. That's the average Kane Waters single doctor general practice. This is an amazing opportunity to be a dentist. It's one of the hardest professions to get into. So I always tell you that when you're an associate, you're at risk, because this is an exact reason I'm talking about when I usually give this speech. You're at risk. You know why? Because the senior guy could tell you, senior gal can tell you, at this moment, you're not employed. That's exactly what just took place. It's exactly what took place in corporate. It's exactly what took place in a private practice where you were the associate. Now you're unemployed. Now you're unemployed. You're sitting around like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I really need to take advantage, of owning. The person who's in charge is the person who's owning. So our objectives today is I want to focus on kind of our why. I think it's so important to see kind of your why you're working so hard. Why would you do this? Why would you do? And this could be anything in life. If you don't see your why, it's very difficult to kind of put a game plan. So we'll talk about, once you get your why, we'll talk about how to create this opportunity. We'll talk about this journey of 30 years, key decisions to get right. I'm not a big fan of starting a practice from scratch, and I'll kind of share some of those numbers. Certainly have a thought process about how to handle your dental school debt, and basically when and how to negotiate a deal. So this lecture, as I mentioned, I've done this before. I'm going to, just for time purposes here, I'm going to kind of speed through this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on going over the slides, but if there's something that from a content standpoint, you're like, hey, you went too fast. Okay, well, the good news is if you just type in why you must own in any YouTube, Google, whatever, you're going to pop up the old guy there, and you can replay this message pre-COVID. Okay, I want us to focus quickly on what our why message is and the how. Then I want to talk about how COVID, basically this health crisis we're in, and also this financial crisis we're in, will impact, you know, some of your decisions as we, from a valuation standpoint, are looking at this business that you're about ready to purchase and what it's going to look like kind of going forward. So again, some of this has been recorded. I do this in a 3-hour speech, and I do a lot of these in 45-minute speeches. And so just click in that kind of why you must own, and that'll go back to, you know, a year or two, and you can hear this message as it relates. So let's talk about kind of my 5 reasons that I've always said you must own, and now I'm going to actually address some of those from as I put my COVID hat on. So number 1, you're going to make more money. Right now, when you make no money because you're unemployed, you know, at least some money by owning the practice, being able to see emergency patients, something just to kind of keep the bills and the patients, your business afloat. You're going to be able to be in charge of that, and you at least be able to have some financial security. I put this slide up here thinking about a hygienist. Is when you go into business as a general dentist, you first start from when a startup practice, you do your own hygiene. You do everything. You answer the phone, you take out the trash, you do your own QuickBooks and accounting, you do everything because you can't afford it. And slowly you build the brand, you build the patients, and then you bring on the maybe this assistant, this front desk person, then obviously a hygienist is going to come along the way. And so the same thing, when you can't do any more physical dentistry, who do you hire? You hire an associate. Okay, so if you go back, and now that I've got this big business and no patients are coming in, who are you letting go? First person you're letting go is the associate. Okay, I've got 2 hygienists. When do I bring both of them in? Strategize. One full time, make sure they're full time, and I got them all back in, and I bring the second one in, and that's how you would build your business back up. And so we're in this rehiring philosophy now, or rehiring strategy now, that you'll need to think about. And so it's why you want to own, because you're going to be the first person that's going to always be employed. And when I'll show you the math numbers, you're going to make more money. Build equity in the business. It's essentially that if you own something, $1 million practice, it's worth something, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000. And so this is going to be your practice, your brand of how you're going to build this. It's just very important that you understand that there's 5 reasons. The number 2 reason is that you've got a value in your business. You need to be better prepared for retirement. You better understand how important retirement is. And by owning a business, you can actually put a bunch of money into retirement plans, and that's going to basically propel your future, give you a lot of choices. Taxes will be one of your number 1 evils, certainly in your state of Minnesota. You have a nice, cute little state tax on top of your federal tax, and everyone here is going to understand that federal and state taxes will become your evil. How do you combat that evil? You own a business. When you're an employee, that's your tax planning. There's 0 tax planning as the employee. And lastly, number 5, this is the number 1 thing right now, not about money, equity, retirement, or taxes, but you control your own destiny. You're going to control that you're either going to persevere through this, you're going to just build a new brand and be able to absolutely grow through this, you know, or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to let my practice, you know, kind of go away. You are in control. Young people with debt and drive, they're gonna persevere at minimum. You're gonna have to maintain. Young people in debt that maybe just bought the business, I would only see one thing, that's actually going to go. It's going to go up. So quickly going to hit through these on how to make more money, because it is important. The best way to combat debt is something very simple: making more money. If you're in the mindset of pay down debt, pay down debt, pay down debt, the best way to pay down debt is to own a practice, because you can make more money. And this is the math behind this. So you're going to come out of your program either as a D4, or you're going to get an AGD or GPR residency. You're going to work 1 or 2, 3 years in corporate, and you're going to do a certain amount of doctor production. And that doctor production, in this example, is $60,000 a month. Could be 50, could be 40. You're going to have a hygienist that is going to be working with you, or in this case, 2 hygienists. So as a GP, you're going to be working for somebody 60,000 a month, 60 times 12, that's 720. That math equates to you're getting paid as an associate 27, 28%, something like that. You're going to make $200,000. As an owner, you have to ask yourself, if I'm doing 720 of doctor production, how much hygiene am I checking? General rule for you to understand, if you're not in that ownership role, it's about 75%, 70% of the practice, in that range, 70-75% of the practice is doctor, 20, 25, 30% of the practice is hygiene. So if I'm doing 720 of doctor, I have to know as an associate, I'm actually checking around 280 of hygiene. Say it differently. If I'm doing 720 of doctor, I know that I'm actually running $1 million practice. How much would you make as running that same practice as an owner? With a good overhead at 58%, which is the average overhead that we have at King Waters practices. For GP practices doing $1 million or greater, they make $420,000, twice as much as you would before. It's a 30-year period, 30-year journey from 30 to 60. You can either make 200, you can make 400. Okay, it's not complicated, this math. We're talking 6, 7, 8, 9, $10 million more of income to yourself for doing the exact same work: dentistry, hygiene, dealing with people, dealing with moms, dealing with kids, dealing with dads, dealing with grandpas, dealing with people. And you're going to do this, so you might as well become the owner. So this is the number one thing we're going to talk about. You're going to make more money. Number two, this $1 million practice is worth something. And then Hillary, if you want to expand here a little bit about just some of the, from a local standpoint, on just some of the valuations that you see locally. I know from a global standpoint, I kind of have a general rule of you got brand new, beautiful ADEC equipment. You're in a major metro city. You've got a really low overhead. You might see valuations in kind of that 80 to 85%. The rural areas are more in the maybe 60 to 65%. But just because we do have a very regional audience today, maybe you can expand a little bit on what you're seeing on the valuation side there locally.
Yeah, so here it really depends on location. I mean, location, that's number one rule of real estate. Same applies for practice. We're usually seeing anywhere from, if you're in the metro area, so especially in the first ring suburbs like Edina, or places where a lot of people want to buy a practice. Everyone wants to practice in Edina, or Minnetonka, or St. Paul, or downtown Minneapolis. We're generally seeing around 70 to 75% collections, sometimes a little higher if it is, you know, maybe brand new equipment and you build out a really hot, you know, area like Grand Avenue, or like, you know, somewhere near Southdale, or downtown Minneapolis. You can maybe get a little bit higher price just because there's more interest in it. Mm-hmm. But that's usually the general rule of thumb. If you're getting out into the, you know, up north, especially where it's a lot harder to sell a practice, you're probably seeing more along the lines of, you know, the 60, 65, sometimes even lower, depending on where it is. But it really is about location in Minnesota, and it's about, you know, how many buyers want that practice. And in my opinion, you can find, I feel like the best practices I've ever seen are either third ring suburbs like Elk River, Buffalo, Farmington, where I grew up, or out north, like up in Lake Country, like Brainerd, Virginia, Grand Rapids. Those are some really great practices that you can get for a much lower price, and you will actually probably collect just as much. You'll have lower overhead, and cost of living up there is a lot less. So it really depends on the location and the number of buyers, because the practices up north, you tend to stay in the market a lot longer just because there's just not as much interest. And I know, and Charles and I have talked about this, and the main reason being, you know, usually you have a spouse that has a job, probably at Medtronic or Target, or somewhere in the cities that you can't move. So there's definitely a lot more demand for the practices in the metro, and that's usually what drives the price too.
I always say when I'm visiting with either if I'm visiting with the young female dentist or the young male dentist, if I'm asking the male dentist about location, I always ask, hey, where's your wife from? And then if I'm asking, talking to the female dentist, I'm just like, oh, where are you from? And, maybe she says up north, northern, then I'm like, oh, okay, so you and your husband are going up there. Because generally, there are times that woman is absolutely going to put her foot down on what's going to happen in that relationship. And they usually get what they want as far as location. So it's just like it's a supply demand thing. It's what it simply boils down to. The more most people do want to live in major metro cities, and so there's a demand there, and the price is higher. And sometimes these practices, they go for above market price. They go for not 85%, they may go for 90, sometimes 95%. If there is a buyer and a seller that agree upon a price, they're going to figure this out. So I've seen these ridiculous prices, that happen. It's just because they can. So a third reason is so important, and it's very hard for a 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old to really think about, is one day they're not going to be doing dentistry anymore. So when you're not doing dentistry anymore, you got to think about it. Big picture is, how much money do I need to put away? What type of assets do I need to put away to basically have a really good lifestyle for me and my spouse? And now my kids are, off to college. I don't have the big house anymore. I got the little house. And for us to kind of sustain ourselves through retirement. So these are the basic questions that you have to go through and to really address. And again, I've got this already on video, so I'm gonna do this really quickly because there's a lot of good content I really want us to hit about how valuations will be impacted with COVID. But we start off, and these are our assumptions. We're 30, we're broke. We start off with the cost of goods and services today are going to be more expensive. Just means inflation. The historic rate of inflation has been 2.5%. The historic rate, as far as you being able to put money away into some type of retirement account, regardless of a small 10%, 12% dip that we've seen so far, maybe this year. The history of the stock market, the history has yielded over 8%. So therefore, we use 8% from a retirement standpoint. We use the history. Cost and goods and services are going to be 2.5%. And then certainly as a small business owner, you will want to understand one of the greatest things that you can take advantage of is, as a business owner, is tax planning and then pension planning. It's the ability to put money away into a retirement account. It just means you put the money away, huge tax deduction, and it grows all the way until you're 72 without touching it, without tax. It's by far one of the greatest gifts from a wealth accumulation standpoint you can possibly think about. And why is this so important? Well, the important thing is that if you're a business owner, you can take advantage of that. When you work for somebody, you're very limited with the amount that you can actually save. So it's very hard to try to plan a race that you've never been in, but you want that all these older coaches to say, look, here's how you run the marathon. This is what you can do to prepare for it. And this is what the old guy here is trying to give you some insights. So own the business, know and trust me that some of these bullets are probably safe to account for, and know that you'll probably need about $15,000 a month to live on all the way in the future. In your early 60s, you're going to need that amount of money to live on just to basically live a nice lifestyle at the end. And so if you combine that concept of I'm 30, I'm broke, stuff's going to be way more expensive tomorrow, I'm going to have to get some type of 8% rate of return somewhere, I'm going to save tax deferred, I need to somehow get a lot of wealth to where I can get a $15,000 monthly check, which is, with inflation, it just means I need to somehow get $30,000 a month, or say it differently, I need to save enough money to where when I'm 60, if I'm 30 today, if I'm 60, I need to get a check of $360,000 a year, $30,000 a month, because my $15,000 today with inflation is going to be $30,000 tomorrow. And so that's a lot of numbers. And so I know that I can lose you there, but in the end, you're going to need to accumulate $8.5 million to make this life work between 60 and 90. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to understand how money grows. You're going to understand that it's a big number you'll need to accumulate. Understand that you can do this as a small business owner making $400,000 a year. Understand that this is your financial plan and not mine. And so what I'm asking young people to do is become an owner, and then this process is basically saving $70,000 a year over the next 30 years to be able to accumulate this $8 million. So here's the math.
Well, and I can chime in real quick. Just as a business owner myself, I can tell you that this is probably one of the best things about being a business owner, besides the control thing, is that there's so many options and cool things that you can do as a business owner to put away for retirement. There's pension plans, there's so many different options you can take advantage of, and tax benefits too, just the tax deductions that you can take. It's incredible, and it was very eye-opening when I first started my business about how many cool things I can do as an owner. And one of the coolest things was retirement and all the awesome plans that you can do as an owner that I never would have been able to do if I was working for somebody else. So
yeah, I mean, just think of it. Just think of it.
Owner myself, yeah.
So Hillary's in the same boat, right? She could be an attorney that works for a law firm. She could make, let's say, 120,000, 130,000. You know, she could do the same work and bill for more and make, you know, twice as much. It's a very similar relationship. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4 times. I don't know. And now she makes this money. What's her number one evil? Is taxes, and then wealth accumulation. So then the same process is, if she made 300,000, does she want to pay tax on 300? No. She immediately knows she can save 70,000 in a retirement plan. So now it lowers her taxable income down to 230. So I'll show you taxes here in a second. But what we're trying to just illustrate here is that you could do this. And I'm not asking a D4, a D3, a AGD, GPR, an unemployed GP that's working for corporate right now to save $70,000. I'm asking you to buy into the concept of why you must own. And then once you do own and you make $300,000+ a year, to understand that if you don't have a plan about saving the money, the IRS is going to take the money from you. The state of Minnesota is going to take the money from you. And so understand, I'm very passionate about this because it's real. It's real to me. It's going to be real to you. This is what your taxes look like. You don't have to make much money in this country. Okay. $200,000, that last, you think a single person, you made 200 grand. That's the last $37,000 that you brought home to your home. I mean, you were taxed at 32%. And plus you've got your Minnesota tax. And I didn't do my homework, but I think that it's around 8, 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at 8, 9%. So you're roughly at 40% tax on that last $37,000. So in your mind, sometimes when you're young and you've got $400,000 of debt, you're kind of weirded out by it. And you're like, well, I'm just going to go work for a few years, and then I'm going to, pay down my debt. Okay. I'm going to do this for 4 years. That's what I'm going to do. 4 years. That's what I'm going to do. When you tell me that, 4 years, guess what you just gave up? You gave up $800,000 of income because you could have made twice as much as an owner. As an owner, I would have had you make the money, and I would have had you start deducting a lot of things for your business, including a pension plan. So now I'm accumulating wealth of $70,000 per year that you wouldn't have had. And so you fast forward 4 years, and you as the associate or something, maybe you got your dental school debt down, but you have no money. Okay, you are broke. Okay, you're dead broke and no options. Okay, the owner that now had saved $200,000+, now all of a sudden COVID hits. They've been making more money. They've got some of their debt paid down, but they've got cash in the bank. I can immediately access my 401k plan immediately, $100,000 just like that. Pull it down if I need it. Okay, who's in a better position here? And I'm telling you, the owner is 100% of the time. Is there risk associated? Absolutely, but understand tackling taxes is going to come because you're the owner and you have the ability to kind of play this game. Step 5 or reason 5 is just you're in charge. We really kind of hit this home. You get to hire, you get to fire, you get to give free dentistry away, use lab supplies. You get to do whatever you want to do because it's your business. So that's our 5 reasons. I know I went through it quickly. Go back and pull that YouTube video up and take a peek at that. I want to go into banking next, pre-COVID and then post-COVID, and then we'll Hillary, I want your just thoughts on some of this as well. But pre-COVID, basic things I would tell you is they want to see some experience. They want to see liquidity. Okay, what's liquidity? Liquidity means this: if the practice collections is $800,000, excuse me, $1 million, the price is $800,000. The bank is going to say, okay, Charles, do you have any experience? Are you a D4? Yes, with no experience. You don't have enough experience to get the $800,000 loan, so I need you to go get some experience. Do you have any cash? Nope, I don't have any cash. Okay, well, you need some experience, and you need 5% of the purchase price minimum. So at 5% on 800, it needs $40,000 of cash. Banks don't like to lend more than about 85% of the collection. So if I've got $1 million practice, they don't like to lend more than about $850,000. Okay, and you have a decent credit score. This is all pre-COVID stuff. Okay, and I've got, this is the first plug I'm going to do for the podcast that Carmelo mentioned, is if you go to your podcast app and just type in the 3 letters NDP, this exact slide has about a 30-minute episode just on lending, and we're familiar with all these major banks, from either PNC on the East Coast to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Endeavor, all the major banks that do a couple $1 billion of loans. This is their process. We've interviewed them and know exactly basic in kind of what they're looking for. Now, anything to do with post-COVID, I still think you need some experience. You're going to need the cash. The only thing different that I'm going to tell you now is once you purchase that practice, or once you're about ready to purchase that practice, we're really going to want to see at what month did the practice open up. I want to see on a monthly basis, probably 2019. I probably want to look at the monthly collections. So $1 million practice, let's see, it did $83,000 per month. Maybe January and February it did $83,000, and half of March it did $40,000. Okay, so I can see the trend. I got 14 months, 15 months, it's doing $80,000. Okay, we were off for half of March, all of April, maybe a portion of May, depending on the state. I was just talking to somebody in New York this morning, and they're immediate June. Who knows when that's going to really crank back open? But we want to get the practice open, and I want to be able to see what these collections are going to start looking like. And banks have not yet figured out how this is going to work. They're saying, give me the deal. But I promise you, defaults are happening in dental that they've never happened before. A large number of default are going to happen, period. A lot of startup practices that didn't have working capital, they don't have part-time jobs anymore. You're going to see some defaults. You're going to see some, maybe some older doctors that just don't want to come back. They have small loans. You're going to see some defaults in dentistry, and I think that's going to change the credit departments and the risk departments of how they look at this. So they're saying one thing right now, it's all good, but I think it's going to change kind of going forward. So they're going to need to look at the collections, and certainly as an advisor, that's what I'm going to look at. Also, I want to look at profits, and I'm going to show you some slides later about a practice that I'm projecting in 2020 goes down, not just from a collections, but from a profit. And we also just don't know what our PPE is going to be kind of going forward. ADA has their recommendations now, but we just don't know what it's going to really take that the patient is actually going to require certain PPE. I mean, heck, our business is going to open up as a CPA firm in Dallas with 190 employees, and same thing. We're going to be all having masks and social distancing still as we slowly enter back into our CPA type world. So I've got an episode that we updated as well on Transition Talk on this subject of evaluations. And so any thoughts or anything on this as well, Hillary, as we talk about this valuations and lending?
Yeah. So the number, when you had that little circle that banks still love you, and that's true. I mean, they still do. They still want to finance practice loans. And it totally depends on where you were in the process when everything got shut down. So I have deals that were supposed to close in April that have obviously gotten pushed back, but they're totally fine. They just happen to be really amazing practices. And, banking there's no change. But anything that hadn't been, approved pre-shutdown, it totally varies by bank. I've been hearing some banks are, they're going to look at the numbers and, it's kind of the same, pre-COVID requirements. Liquidity, I've been hearing from every bank, liquidity is going to be probably the most important thing post-COVID. They would much rather have you have more debt and more liquidity than the other way around. So as much as you want to pay off that student debt, it's better to have more liquidity and more money in the bank right now than ever before. And then I have heard, especially from some of the larger banks, they haven't sort of come up with a plan yet because they're still inundated with PPP loans. So they just haven't even been thinking about practice loans right now. But they have indicated that they're probably going to want to see at least 30 to 60 days worth of production numbers post-opening before they'll consider, the loan amount or anything to that effect. But so it totally depends on the bank right now. And some banks are still full steam ahead. Some are, especially the larger banks that are dealing with a lot of the PPP loans, are much more cautious and are kind of on hold for now. But at the same time, they're like, we'll be back. We'll be right back. And
No doubt.
And banks definitely love dentists. So regardless, they love dentists. And I've had clients where banks have literally fought over them for their loans. So there's a lot more banks now that do dental loans, and it's good because it, creates lower interest rates and better deals for dentists. So
yeah, you're getting in the neighborhood of around 3.5% loans right now, so they're very, very favorable. Again, there's a 99% success rate that dentists have with their loans, so less than a 1% default rate. So it's been really good. It's been a good business to be in, and from banking, lending to dentists, and so it's a no-brainer. So what are your critical steps? Get out of school, get some experience, get the cash. Why do you need the cash? Because again, that will make yourself look good for banking. So what do they look for? Experience and cash. And obviously they look at the practice you're going to purchase. Does the practice make a little money, make a lot of money? Okay, banks want to see that it makes a lot of money. So then you finally own. And step 2. Then step 3, I'm a big proponent of bringing specialists and consultants and to help you grow the business. And so if your hygiene department is inefficient, let's bring a hygiene consultant in to help you grow it. If you're not getting enough new patients, don't try to figure this out on your own. Bring consultants in that can help you with, better case presentation, better, how to ask for, new patient referrals, how to, help get, Google reviews. And these are things that a consultant has just specialized. You pay them, they come in, and they fix a thing, and they go, I love to bring those types of people in. Then you're making a lot of money. What are your number one issues? Make a lot of money is taxes and pension planning. And what's the best possible friend for tax planning is the pension plan. What's the best possible plan to accumulate wealth is use the pension plan, which also offsets the taxes. And then lastly, step 6, we'll start to pay down our dental school debt. I'm going to quickly go through these slides because I want to make sure we hit the valuation component, because a lot of people, young people, are thinking about that. Established doctors are thinking about it as well. This next slide is, okay, my original plan, Charles, was I was going to pay down my debt. I'm starting to be convinced that maybe I should own sooner than later, but there's no practices for sale. And the reason there's no practices for sale is because you're not finding the practice. And so you need to create an opportunity for yourself. And so this next campaign, this works. I cannot stress how successful this is. No one ever.
I had a client that succeeded at this. Yep.
Yeah. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a cover letter of you, picture of you, the wife, the husband, the dog, and tell a story about you, why you're going back to, northern, Minnesota or something. You grew up here, you married the prom queen, you were the high school this, you did the GPR here, your dad and this. Tell a story That's going to be in your cover letter. And it's going to be in this letter format. This is a 9x12 yellow envelope. It's going to have a Sharpie to and from, confidential, that's going to be handwritten. And then I want a Sharpie there and a bunch of tape on the back, because the open rate with this method is going to be opened by the doctor. So these established doctors right now, it's the perfect time to be sending them a letter and saying, hey, I know we're in unusual times, but as a young person that I want to own, I want to make sure that you know that this is my passion. I've been working with these banks, and this is my ties to the area. I'd love to buy you coffee or Zoom a meeting with you or something. Okay, so this method absolutely works. It talks about it in episode 2 that's got a couple of thousand plays on that episode. I want you to do this to a very targeted area. I don't want it to be generic. I want it to be very specific. I want it to go to, a general rule is from a direct mail standpoint. If you do this, you're going to get between like a 5 to 8% return on your investment. So I'm talking about if you mail, 200, I mean, we're talking about, 10, 15 solid leads that you didn't have. You don't want, I would say, if you find this opportunity on a practice through a broker, it's fine, but there's going to be other people involved. If you can create the relationship with the established doctor and you guys come up with a plan of how it's going to work, go to someone like a Hillary and say, hey, Hillary, we got this plan. We figured this out. Can you help us with the transition? It's so much easier because Hillary's just paid a flat fee to put you guys together. We do the same thing on a national level as we put people together. I don't do the attorney work. So if it was local, I would just do a consulting to put it together. Then Hillary comes in and does, all of the consulting from the legal standpoint. So this method worked, guys. You have to trust me that if you want an opportunity, go create it yourself, knock on doors, speak to established doctors, talk to the Benco, the Shine, the Patterson reps, like make this your #1 agenda. And don't rely on your iPhone to go on the internet and type in practices for sale and let that be your only solution. You're not going to get there. I mean, you may get there, but it's going to be very competitive, and everyone else is going to be doing the same thing. You've got to do something different. This crap works. Trust me. Go find and create your opportunity. Eventually, you need to grab information from this practice: tax returns, profit and loss statements, investment statements. You're going to need to go get this information, and I highly recommend that you bring somebody in to kind of guide you through this process. Very self-serving here because that's what our firm does, but there's a lot of good CPAs that work just in the field of dentistry that can help you from a buyer perspective. And so episode 4 is really more about communicating to you about how you're going to communicate with this doctor, of how you're going to get information. So you don't want to just say, for example, hey, senior doctor, I need your tax returns and your profit and loss statements. That's very invasive. Okay, it's very much you build a relationship. I talk about the coffees. I talk about meeting with them. I talk about how to interview them and let them tell their life story. How you take notes. How you have to follow up with these people. Send them cards and letters of thank you and gratitude. How you would, even if you ever met the staff, what you would do in that process. Then eventually you do it in a nice professional way, grabbing the financials from them. If you do it in the right way, you're going to be the person that gets to buy the business. If you do it in the wrong way, they'll get frustrated. They're going to go to the broker. They'll open this up, and it'll be a bidding war, and you're kind of left on the low end of this process. So definitely want to understand this. Starting a practice from scratch, here's the math: is you're a GP, and what you really want to know is, I want to make a few $100,000 doing this. I want nice new stuff, and I want it to be in this area. But in the end, you want to have a return on your investment. So as a GP, if you're asking yourself, once I get to $500,000 of collections, how much do I make? On a startup practice, you'll be making about $125,000. Okay, so what if I get to $1 million? Well, the $1 million practice, you should be making somewhere around that $400,000. Okay. So your bigger question is, how long does it take to get to $1 million practice from a startup? And the answer has to do with new patients. You will need active patients on $1 million practice of roughly 1,800 active patients. Do the math. 30 new patients a month times 12 is 360. How many convert? Maybe 300 that stay in retention. 300 into 1,800 is 6 years. It's going to take you 6 years. So when will you start saving? I don't know. Maybe you're going to start saving for retirement at, I don't know, year 5, 6, 7. I don't know. That's going to have to do with your new patients. So I don't mind going down this road of a startup, but man, tell me I've got no debt. Tell me that you married a so-and-so orthopedic surgeon and you know, she or he makes several $100,000. You've got no debt. You're from the community, and everybody in the community, you know, doesn't want to bring an associate in, and you could afford to do it. And your dad is a business guy, and he's going to help you. You've done the demographics, and it's a no-brainer. You're doing procedures these other guys or gals are not. Okay, you've sold me. I get it. Or you're a surgeon, or you're a pediatric dentist. Sell me a story of the why, and I'll definitely support you. Of okay, sounds like a great idea, and then I'll guide you to certain vendors and ideas, and let's get this thing, you know, off the ground. So it's just a numbers game to me of how quickly we can get this thing going.
Well, and real quick, just to chime in on that, probably the one exception to that, at least locally, is if you go up north.
Sure.
Just because in Minnesota, there are grant programs and loan forgiveness programs for dentists to go up north and start a practice simply because there are no dentists up there. That's probably like the one exception to that rule, just because there's nobody up there. So you're going to have like 1 million patients day one because there's no one else around. And you will get that loan forgiveness and grant money to do,
That's a great point.
a startup.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't go
but
through
yeah,
that. But
if you're trying to do a startup in Edina, no, I'm not going to, you know. But
yeah, rural areas are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to go to an area that's just super high in demand, there's no one there. No brainer to pull that trigger, you know, on that. And even if you do that, you know, it's go to a smaller area. There's only maybe two GPs. They don't want to sell now. Then go ahead and do the startup, and then grow it, and then maybe even acquire just the patients from that doctor or doctors as they slowly start to transition out. So yeah, they're definitely that's part of that sales pitch. Like, sell me on it. If you can sell me on it, I'm all in.
Did I sell you? Did I sell you on it, Charles?
You sold me. You sold me. Rural
Okay.
Minnesota. No doubt. If we go work in a practice, and it's busy, I love it. This is going to actually be from associate to owner, and so meaning you're going to be a partner. So this is just partnerships. These are people that are going to be working together for like 5 years or greater. I want it to be really busy. $1 million, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. Great overhead, lots of new patients, you know, probably in this case, at least 6 operatories, enough for 7. So basically we can see from a numbers perspective that you're going to be able to work together, and we can see that the business is really going to take off with you, is what I would like to see. And so there's an episode that just goes over that for 30 minutes about how that process would work. You know, I want you to be a partner within a 2-year period. I want the marquee to be changed. I want you to be introduced as a doctor and not as an associate. I want the front desk to be trained about how to, you know, drive new patients, you know, to you and not to the established doctor. Or if my established doctor has hired me from a consulting standpoint, I'm explaining to him or her. A lot of times it's him. Guys are just, give it to me, give it to me. You know, women owners are like, if I'm bringing somebody in, they're going to be seeing the new patients. You know, they typically don't have, you know, giant egos. Our men are the ones that have the egos. I'm sorry about that. But you know, what's that?
I said, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, they're just a little bit harder to deal with, but that's perfectly fine. Let's buy a practice real quick, and then I've got to keep us on schedule. So I want us to show you a practice that's for sale. And let's look at it pre-COVID, and then we'll look at some post-COVID numbers. So I'm always looking at practices for sale. I've already looked at 2 this morning. So it's something that's for sale. And so you're asking these basic fundamental questions. What is it gross? What is it net? Can you do the dentistry? How much are you going to make after you pay the debt? Can you live on that amount of money? Is that established doctor going to stay there or not? Coincidentally, this is the exact same process that the bank is going to look for. The same process that your financial advisor, who's ever working for you as a buyer, you're going to go through the same sets of questions. And so what I want to do is I actually want to look at this practice right now, and then I want us to see, does this make sense or not? Okay. So this doctor's been in this practice for 2 years. This is in East Texas. It's super outdated, super outdated. I mean, we've got, carpet, we've got the shadow box for all the lures that this guy, caught all his fish on. We've got the bass. This is my lure, and I caught this fish, and I was down on pond number so-and-so. It's outdated. I mean, it looks like stuff could go in like a museum, but it works. It works. It works for the patients. It works for the two doctors, and they agreed on a price of $600,000 when it was only doing $800,000. We brought the young guy in. He worked for a couple of days, 3 days, 4 days. Now the practice is doing, $1.2 million. And because this practice is in rural East Texas, and because we've got a low overhead and outdated stuff, it makes a lot of money. I mean, it makes $650,000. So this cash flow is flat out amazing. And then the young guy is coming to me saying, well, do you think I should buy it? I am, yes. How quick can we close? Because this is a no-brainer. This is absolutely, how quick can we close? This is a no-brainer type decision. So if I'm looking at this practice, and now all of a sudden this is the 2019 numbers, and I've got a couple of months in January, February, I'm supposed to close in March, but all this COVID stuff hits, then I'm probably going to put a little bit of a pause, just to say, look, I know it was there. Let's get the practice back open, okay? Let's get a good 30, 60 days under the belt to make sure that we're consistently doing, again, that $100,000 a month. I really want to think and kind of see that process through. I want to, for the first time as a consultant, I really want to look at the age of my patient base. I want to be able to look at the age of my employees, okay? Are all of them coming back? Even my procedures. I just really want to look a lot further in the procedures and type of practice I have ever before, because I think I do have some risk with potentially us not being able to do the same dentistry in the same space. I think that some of my patients may not just automatically just come back for the next year or so for hygiene like they have always done. So it's just something we want to be cautious about. But this is a no-brainer investment. Even if it's got outdated stuff, I'm ripping the louvers off the wall, I'm taking the carpet, I'm putting nice new, flooring down, I'm updating, I'm getting a new CAD cam, I'm getting, new, just digital dentistry and Microsoft 10 computers, and everything is just perfect. I can go a couple $100,000 in, still borrow 800, borrow 850. This is still a no-brainer investment, in my opinion, because it makes so much money. Am I going to ask some questions right before we close now? Absolutely. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious about it, and that's going to transition to how businesses are valued. And so we'll do a quick education here, and then I want to kind of show you what our thought processes are from a valuation company kind of post-close. So over here to my right, what I'm going to do is walk us through, and this is the practice that over the last 3 years did 1.4, 1.4, it's an extra 0 in there, and then 1.5. So I like that. It's nice, consistent growth, okay? Look at my overhead, 56, 57, 55%. This business in 19 netted 675. I love it. Great overhead means the doctor's making a lot of money. Okay, now what we're also going to, at the top here, it says weighting. It says 3, 2, and 1. What does this mean? When you value a business, you actually put more weight from a valuation standpoint of the last year. Why? It's because it's most representative of the actual value, okay? Now, if this number went down to $1 million, you should ask questions, okay? And this is exactly what's going to take place this year in 2020. And we'll have to think about what that weighting looks like. So I would take a look at these numbers. The business made 629, 623, and 675, and say, okay, what would you pay for this thing? Well, over the last 3 years, based on these weightings, that my value and cash flow was around 650, which equated to a value of $1.2 million. When I looked at everything, I looked at location, I looked at the assets, I looked at, is the doctor maybe staying around, I looked at the procedure mix. It's not like replacing, like an all-on-4 type practice where the new doctor couldn't do it. I've looked at all of my risk factors, weighted it, and I got a value of 1.2. So that's our base. Okay. Now let's go to 2020 and let's take a look at what conceptually would happen. So I've got my history there. Okay. And first couple of months in this $1.5 million practice that we're hitting, we're consistently hitting 125 a month, January and February. And then I got a half month of March. Okay. Now, this next part is, I don't know the other half of March. I know for a fact I had little to nothing. Maybe I had some emergencies, but for the most part, I had little to nothing. And who knows what May's going to be. Okay. So I'm just going to be conservative and say nothing in May. And then maybe I have 50% of the practice in June, maybe 75 July and August, 85, and eventually I'm at 100. And so my collections this year are $1 million. So I took that same $1 million practice and I layered it on here. And then I actually said, okay, if I brought back my employees, I still had all my fixed costs. So now I'm just not efficient. I'm losing my efficiencies. This practice, I actually put it in a model and it showed that I did those things. My net to me is now only 350. So my practice cash flows really went down from my collections and my profit. So I'm a little bit hesitant and nervous about it. But what do I really want to see? I want to see that sucker, really in the September, October range, maybe even my August that I hit, maybe 80%. I'm really going to look at my months now. And then I'm going to run a financial statement per month. So I can see that my August month, I did this amount and this is my profit. Oh, that's kind of similar to what it was doing before when it was making around 50 a month. That's great. And so I can see that. All right. And that's what I'm going to start looking for. And I'm still going to buy it because I've got those months of consistency now that are back. I got my patients back. The patients are just going to be trained now. The patients that were nervous about the mask, now they're in pain. They're just going to be coming in with a mask. You were nervous about this. It's just going to be the new normal of how we do dentistry. I mean, I'm not a dentist. I'm not a historian, but I don't know, at some point, I think gloves weren't even part of the process.
They weren't.
Right? And then it became
pre-AIDS. Yep.
So
pre-AIDS
at some
epidemic.
point we change. We have to adapt to this new kind of this new thing. So I got to push forward here, but because it just around our time. But what I did is, I think realistically that we can have a lower weight to this 2020 year. Okay. I think as long as I see consistency towards the end of the year, I can give myself a little bit lower weight and I can still justify this $1 million price. I think it's fair. It's no different than a tornado that happened in Joplin. It's no different than a Katrina that happened, in Louisiana, or, something on the East Coast, or we got tornadoes, of course, and you have tornadoes, right? Tornadoes in Minnesota?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So something like that maybe took out maybe the doctor could have been sick. The doctor could have had surgery, out for 2 months. I just want to know what happened, and I want to be able to see that senior doctor was doing all these procedures, new doctor came in. How did it work? Are we still doing the same? Okay, I feel that's a good enough risk through this process. If I just put the weight here on, I just said, well, valuations are, 75% of collections. Therefore, you only did 1.1 million. The practice is only 750. I mean, that's just a give up. If you buy the practice as a buyer and that's what they're willing to sell it to you for, I'm going to tell you that's a gold mine. That's a gold mine if you're able to buy a practice like that, because I could see it was doing $1.5 million the previous year, and I can see the practice growth is still happening in that September, October, November. I'm all in. Let's buy the thing, and shame on selling doctor and shame on selling doctor's advisor just for mailing in that way. That'd be a great opportunity for you as a buyer. But if I'm consulting both people, I just want it to be fair, and I'm going to give some credit to that senior guy that we just kind of had a weird year. So
well,
the
and
unknowns.
also keep in mind, oh, sorry, just
Oh,
to
go
chime
ahead.
in, keep in mind the banks too are, I've asked the banks this question many a time, and they basically have said, yeah, like, I mean, you know, pre-COVID, there have been times where there are little blips, and usually it's because someone had surgery or had a sickness or maternity leave or something. And the banks have always sort of taken those blips and kind of not ignored them, but kind of was like, okay, well, we're not really going to count them. Same thing is happening now, where they're looking at these blips, and obviously everyone's shut down. So it's not just one clinic, it's everybody. And the work is still there. It's just that, and it's not being done. So a lot of people are predicting that there's going to be a backlog of work that, you know, hasn't been done for these last few months. And now people are going to want to get in and get that stuff taken care of. So, so the banks have really said, you know, we want to be cautiously optimistic. We obviously still want to see numbers just to make sure that things do bounce back. And obviously every clinic is completely different, but in my opinion, and maybe I'm just the optimist here. And you know, my parents were practice owners during the recession, and they always told me, like, we barely felt it. And granted, this is definitely different, but you know, people still need dentistry. You know, people can go a long time without going to a restaurant or bar, but they can't go that long without being, you know, getting their dental work done. So, so I think that's a really good model of, you know, obviously it might be slower, but it also might be, bam, you're open. And I have clients that are telling me that they're booked solid for the next 4 months. So yeah, I mean, it definitely has an effect, I think, but at the same time, you have to see what happens. We don't know until we reopen. So that's kind of the X factor. So
Yeah, and how quickly we can, but I'm with you. There's going to be a lot of opportunities here too. I'm telling you
yeah, oh yeah,
it's going to be very unfortunate for a lot of established doctors that, you know, they're in their 70s and, you know, hopefully financially they're set. They've got no debt and it's got a small little practice. They've been just kind of tinkering around with it. And it's nice little, you know, 400 or 500 collection practice, making 100 and so, but they're done. Okay. 70 something year olds that are just like, if they're financially okay, a lot of times it's not even them that's saying it's done, it's their spouse that's saying you're done. It's their kids, their 50 something year old kids saying, Dad, you're done. Okay.
yeah,
You're out. And for the most part, these are a lot of men. There's not a lot of, you know, 80-year-old women just still tinkering around in dentistry. It's very, very rare. And because women are just different. Men hold on to stuff way too long. But I think there's gonna be an opportunity here, guys, that to I don't want to say necessarily take advantage, but I think that established doctors, what they're interested in, if you listen to these podcasts, they're interested in the relationships that they have with their patients. Very, very close relationships that they have with their employees. And then there's a community sense that they have, and it's just hard. It's just so hard for them to let go. And so I always encourage you, when you go down this journey, is to slowly kind of slow back or pull back a little bit, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, so you can kind of get into whatever that new normal post dentistry is. But there's going to be an opportunity here to potentially purchase some of these practices for a very low amount and incorporate those number of patients into your office. So it's a great kind of opportunity. I encourage you guys to, just as we kind of get this thing wrapped up, is to go ahead and get your questions fired off to Carmelo, and so he can start screening those for us for our next, you know, kind of half hour. But just again, summary here, recap is, you know, you own a business. After you get some cash, 1-2 years experience is plenty. That 5% of what you buy. So just making sure $40,000, $50,000 of cash is very, very important. Bring consultants in, make yourself profitable. Tax planning, pension planning are number one as far as like building wealth and kind of managing the cash that you bring home. Eventually pay down your debt. We talked about our 5 reasons you must own. You make more, build equity, tax, pension, and control your own destiny. 30-year career, you better figure it out, because that's your career, not mine. You're going to get tired. It's a physically demanding position. Surround yourself with key people. If you start, just make sure you're thoughtful about it. A rural area, as Hillary mentioned, or surgeon, pedo, You want no debt. So just really think that process through. Getting out of debt's not your number one issue. Owning is, in my opinion. If you come across a great deal, then don't mess it up. That's myself and Christy that run the podcast every 2 weeks. And so there's no commercials on there. There's no self-serving interest. It's just truly educational content that we're kind of giving here today that can motivate you to become a business owner. So that's kind of my passion. Is just, in the end, is people, hey, you inspired us to own, and you gave me a second way to look at, maybe how I'm going to practice, for my career. Hillary, why don't you tell me a little bit about just all your contact information and what you do, and then Carmela, I would say in the next, I'll summarize what we do as well here in a second, but Hillary, why don't you go take the lead here?
So Carmelo kind of said it in the introduction. I own a law firm, but it's also considered a transition firm. The majority, almost about 98% of my clients are dentists, so I mainly cater to dentists. Probably the majority of my clients are buyers in transitions, but I also represent sellers, not just with regular transitions where they already have someone lined up, but I also do broker a little bit with sellers. And basically any legal work you need as a dentist besides litigation, I do. So associate contracts, employment law consulting, business law consulting. I'm licensed in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. Just got Wisconsin, so that was brand new information that wasn't in my bio. But yeah, so basically just helping dentists go through transition process similar to what Charles does. But I do, all the legal work for it too. So I draft the contracts, review the contracts, do the negotiations, closing, all that good stuff that goes along.
Help them get incorporated as well when they need to incorporate. I presume that. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So, and we refer a lot to attorneys as well. So our NDP brand basically is just think of it as an educational forum where we're educating buyers and sellers about how the transition process works. Last year we represented a little over 70 buyers become business owners. We did over 60 valuations, that helping a seller say, hey, what the value is. It's a formal valuation. And then another 40 plus sellers either just list their practice or do some type of consulting where they had the buyer and figure out a strategy that they would sell, to that person. So that's our NDP brand. This is I don't own or don't need Kane Waters. And then a lot of our Kane Waters brand is I own a business. I make probably $300,000 a year or greater. I'm a dentist, and I want someone to do comprehensive financial planning, business planning, strategies on the 5th op, the 6th op, strategies on the building, strategies on the associate. So that's more of the comprehensive plan once I own. But because I have a young audience typically today that we're kind of marketing this presentation to, is we're really focusing just on the why message, and go create your opportunity, and then utilize somebody to guide you through. Certainly Hillary and I are two valuable assets, but there's lots of great people, not just in your state, but nationally as well, that can assist you. So Carmela, that's all I got. I was a few minutes over, but that we've still got plenty of time for questions. So if you want to pop on and kind of lead us through some questions,
yes,
that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Hillary. Great information. I do have some questions here. I would encourage folks, there is the question function. It should be somewhere on your right-hand side or maybe across the bottom. It maybe appears different with different screens, etc. But I encourage you to type in your questions now, and we'll take them. And again, if we don't get to them, we'll certainly try to do that offline and come back. A couple of questions here. You talked about benefits of being an owner, particularly from a tax management perspective or a retirement planning perspective. What if I'm a partial owner or an owner in a group practice? Are those advantages and benefits available to me as a partial owner of a practice?
Yeah, 100%. So let me give you an example of what that would look like. Hillary and I, we are partners together. We run a $2 million operation. And so we're 50-50 partners, or I could be a 25% partner and she could be a 75%. As long as I own something, I have that ability. So in this example of a $2 million practice, we're going to say that she goes to work, does 750 clinical, checks 250 hygiene, 750 clinical, I check 250 hygiene. In that example, we have a 60% overhead. So that means that between us, there's $800,000 to split between our partnership. So she would get her 400, I'd get my 400. And inside of my own corporation, partners, but inside of my own individual S Corp, I get the tax plan. So I get to maybe depreciate assets a certain way. Maybe I want to put my spouse on the payroll because she's a stay home. In this example, me being the male dentist, my stay home spouse is with 3 kids. I may have a strategy I want to put my car through. I may have a strategy. I've got some teenagers. I want to put them on the payroll. So I get the tax plan as a business owner, even in a partnership. I actually have 11 partners as well, big big and so I too tax plan in my own entity. So great question. You do not need to be a sole owner. This works, in a big group practice, or just simply 2 people, or it could work in fractional where you're a 25% owner. In this case, for me and Hillary could be 75. We could still tax plan in our own entity.
Well, and also you would have to make sure you set it up that way too. So some partnerships aren't set up with separate entities, which by the way is a great way to set it up. I've set that up a few times and it's been fantastic. But if you are just straight up partners in one entity, then you would have to work with that partner to figure out, okay, how are we going to be spending our money? Can we do this cool, these cool tax planning, take advantage of all this tax planning in retirement? And so that you would actually have to work with your partner and your group to do that. But if you do set up separate entities, so each partner owns their own separate entity, the entity owns the main, practice, then that gives you the power to do it. And that's a reason why you want to do something like that. I don't see it as often. Unfortunately, I wish I did, because I think it is a great way to do it, because then you do get a little bit more leeway. But yeah, I mean, you can still take advantage of all these tax benefits.
Yeah, in all the Clean Waters partnerships, we set up every one of those partnerships is that model. So we have an LLC in our partnership, and then in this case, Hillary has her own S Corp, I have my own S Corp, and so it's a great way for just flexible tax planning. So
I agree.
That should address your question there, Carmelo.
Excellent. Great. So another question's come in, and this, I guess, is directed towards Charles, but Hillary certainly chime in. Does a person's age or length of their working career influence your recommendation for them to buy a practice? This individual says they've been in corporate practice for 15 years. Is there a window of opportunity to get in and be an owner?
Yeah,
wow.
It very, very common too for actually even somebody from the military. So the answer is it is a no-brainer to still own, because for someone who's been doing it 15 years, best guess is they are, maybe started 27, 28. I'll put them at 30. They're still 47. If they're planning on purchasing or planning on working for another 10 years, run the math game. So if I just stay the associate at corporate, I'm making $250,000. How much are you going to make as an owner? You're typically going to make twice as much. So that's $250,000 times 10 years, $2.5 million. Did you tax plan as an owner? Yep. Did you save in your pension plan? Yep. Did you build equity in the business and now you paid for your $1 million+ practice and did you sell it? Yep. Who's got the biggest net worth? Who had the most choice? No brainer. And
I've had clients who have done that, specifically women clients who kind of wanted to work as an associate while they were having kids, just because it made sense for them and their family. And then they just, probably about, I think they were 10, 12 years of being a dentist. And then they decided to be their kids were older. They're like, all right, I'm ready, ready to go. And holy moly, have they taken off. And I think having that experience is great, because then you have that experience. You're confident in your skills. Your production level is really top notch. So you're poised to be a really great practice owner. So
I've got an episode to feed on that we did is, sometimes, kind of a work-life balance person doesn't have to always be the mom. It could be a dad. But, if it's a smaller practice and let's say, hey, I only want to work 3 days a week and I'm doing like 550 or 600 and that's all I want to do, and it looks like I only make like 180, why would I do that? And one of the options is, remove that short-sighted hat and basically say, what if Hillary and I both work together? And so, Hillary, you run your 600 collection practice, I'll run my 600 collection practice. Now we run a 1.2. Now we share the same fixed costs, and now we're just more efficient. So now maybe I'm not making like 200,000 out of my 600 combined out of my 1.2. Maybe I'm making like 250 and you're making 250. So now all of a sudden it actually makes financial sense for us to do that. We can cover each other as, single or married, situations with kids and that balance for all those emergency stuff. So absolutely, it still is a no-brainer to own. So
well, and guess what? If you're an owner, you get to dictate your schedule. So I have a lot of clients who are young moms, and being a practice owner, they get to rearrange their schedule around their kids. I also do that. I mean, I rearrange my schedule as a business owner around my kids. So I couldn't do that if I worked for a big law firm or if you work for a big corporate office. So even work-life balance is pretty cool as a practice owner. So
yeah, I had an example of a dentist, a pediatric dentist here in the Dallas area, and I've told this story a dozen times. She did $1.3 million with a 50% overhead. So she made $650,000 a year as a practice owner. She closed her pediatric practice, closed the doors every day, and went home at 3 p.m. The busiest time a pediatric practice has, 3 p.m. You know why? Because she could, and she had 4 kids.
Yep.
And so we bought the practice.
Get off the bus.
We bought the practice. We paid a premium for it. And my buyer now does over $2 million, and everyone's happy. So it's, again, great thing about being the owner. She could have easily just made, $1,200 a day as a per diem all those years, or she could have made $650, and she sold the $1.3 million business for 1.2. So, I mean, again, it goes back to the same thing over and over again. It's just, if you understand your why, you're going to do a really good job of creating the opportunity for yourself.
Great. And another question, dealing with financing, but if a seller is willing to do seller financing, is that something the buyer should seek out? Is that recommended? And what have you seen for rates and terms in a seller financed relationship? Is that something you're familiar with and seen?
Yeah. Yep. So my New Yorker call this morning is mother, father, and son. Son's going to buy out basically mom and dad. They have already agreed upon a very low price between the parties. And in this case, they're just going to do a promissory note to their son. And so generally, that's going to be a low interest rate. There's actually rules as far as the states, what those interest rates, have to be when it's a family. But in a general relationship where there is just two, kind of third parties kind of buying and selling it, the buyer, what I like to do is always get the buyer pre-qualified with the bank. It's really low interest rates right now. I've seen acquisition loans, at 3.2%. So we're talking extremely low. Now, if the seller is going to secure that financing and they're going to offer it and they're going to do it at 3% below, and that's now not going to show up in your credit report, hey, no brainer to definitely take advantage of that. But most sellers don't want to take their life's work and put an amortization schedule over 10 years for 3% to sell to you, to move to Florida, for you to mess something up, and then them not to have their license to go back. So in general, I don't recommend my seller to do that. But if you've got some great uncle that's just going to do that for you and low interest rate and long period of time or something, then I get it. But I always like to get my buyer just pre-qualified first, just so they can kind of do the deal on their own.
So I'm sorry.
I have a little bit of an alternative just to chime in. I actually prefer the buyer to get bank financing just because of what happened during COVID. With bank financing, usually the banks will allow you to defer payments if something happens. You're also much more likely to have those remedies available if you can't make payments, as opposed to doing it with a private party, because those people are depending on that money, and a lot of times they won't defer payments. And it usually is a little bit cleaner. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I mean, if you really want to do seller financing and they're offering you a great rate and you know the person, and that's the way you want to go, awesome. But like Charles said, I would still talk to other banks and see what they're offering, because sometimes they can offer you a much better deal. And, if something does go wrong, the options of getting that deferred sometimes are a little bit better than some stranger that you bought a practice from, and they might be like, nope, you got to pay me no matter what, so it totally depends on the situation, I think.
Yeah. The attendee goes on a bit further and asks, maybe for a subjective question, is a 10-year with a 7-year balloon at 7% fair? I don't know if that's something.
No.
No.
No. That's a great deal if you're the seller. If the seller's asking that question, yes, the buyer's going to give you 7% on your money guaranteed. I like that, but no, it's a 10-year amortization schedule. All these major banks literally do billions of dollars of loans, and the current rates in the marketplace are roughly in these low threes right now. Startup practices are around 4%. Real estate's again in the mid threes, so it's just super low.
Yeah, good. So another question we have is, what is the average length and time needed for an acquisition from start to close? What's your experience been?
I'll let you
I
start
would say,
go ahead.
3 months is usually what I always say, at least 3 months. If there's real estate involved, it'll probably be longer, just because there's a lot more due diligence that has to be done. Usually a bank will require an appraisal, sometimes an environmental study. So I always say at least plan for 3 months. Just to give everybody time to get all the paperwork done, do all the due diligence. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. It totally depends on the transition, but for sure 3 months, probably 4 if real estate's involved. And right now, I'd say more like 5, 6, just because we gotta, we're kind of pushing things back, but in a normal situation, at least 3.
Yeah, we try to. My answer to that is it just depends. I'd want to interview the buyer. I'd want to interview, do you have the liquidity? Can you do the dentistry? I'd want to interview what we're buying. I'd want us to know that it's going to make financial sense. Same thing with the real estate. Do they have the valuation already complete or not? Have you guys already met? Your spouse loves the area. Does she love the area? So if I can get past 5 or 6 hurdles like that, where I've got the price, the buyer and seller basically like and love each other. Our goal date is 60 days from now. If I can't close on the real estate, we'll do a lease and then I'll purchase. I can definitely execute everything in a window of 60 days or less, but it's after I have several of my boxes checked. But if it's just like, how quick can I close, and I don't have a practice I'm even looking at, infinity, I don't know, it could be months. You got to go do your due diligence to go figure that, go get that practice, make sure you like it, bring it back, and let's make sure that he or she is very reasonable about how this is going to work.
Great. Another question is, and maybe need some clarification on this, but how are you selling commercial property and the practice? So dealing with the two, I guess, together as a bundle.
Well, they're just separate transactions. They're completely separate. So if quote unquote it's $1 million for the practice and includes the real estate, that could be an amazing deal or it could be a horrible deal. Okay, so if the real estate's worth $1 million, it's amazing, because it's got $500,000 of collections as well in the practice. So you really have to look at the transactions separately, and they are. The bank looks at them separately. The attorneys look at them separately. There's a separate transaction for both. So if it was a package deal, you just need to break out to figure out what the value of the actual real estate is, like Hillary said, you would get, some type of commercial appraisal. The bank is going to look at it, the loan, the appreciation schedule from a tax, it's all separate. And so in this example, it's $1 million. Let's say the building is worth 400,000. Then I would go back and basically say, okay, so that means we're going to pay $600,000 for the practice. And then if my practice collections was $600,000 and I had a 75% overhead, that's a bad deal. Okay.
Yeah.
Because now I'm paying 100% of collections for my practice, and I bought into real estate that doesn't make sense for the practice. Now, if it was $1 million practice and my real estate was worth 400, and then my practice collections was like 900,000, and it had a really good overhead, say 50%. So holy crap, I'm actually getting a practice for 600,000 that's doing 900 collections. That ratio is like 66% of collections with an amazing overhead, and I really like the building. The no-brainer. So you have to break the two out to figure out exactly what you're getting.
Right.
Right. And I would also say too that if you can purchase the building and it's something that you do like, try to, because the opportunity to purchase a building can sometimes be fleeting. And a lot of times they want to, the seller wants to sell both. And if you're like, well, I don't really know if I want the building, I'm just going to buy the practice for now and we'll just lease. Well, then that seller is going to be getting that rental money for years and years. And then, who knows if you're going to be able to buy it at some point in time. So I always encourage to at least consider buying the building at the same time, if you can. And it definitely is a separate transaction, and there is different due diligence involved and paperwork involved. But if you can do it and it's reasonable, I say go for it, absolutely, because then you're paying yourself rent and not somebody else. But yeah.
So Hillary, kind of related. Someone else asked, what about cash needed for that? So a portion for the practice,
Yep.
portion for the real estate, 5%
Yep.
for practice, 20% for available for real estate. How would you see that happening?
So let's play that game, because this is I'm gonna tag on exactly what Hillary said. Hillary is basically saying, I really want the real estate. And that's exactly what I want to say too, because you're building wealth in something. I don't want to pay $6,000 monthly rent, for the next 120 months. I paid $720 of rent that just poof and gone. Now you may not have the cash in this example of a $600,000 piece of real estate. Let's say you don't have $120,000 of cash. You qualify for the practice and you get the practice, but you don't qualify from the banking standpoint. Then what I would do from an advisor standpoint is I would say, hey, do you like this practice? Oh, Charles, it's amazing. It's 3,000 square feet. It's this and this and this. Okay, and we've got the rent factored in. But I don't have enough to buy the thing. So what I would tell you is in my lease, what I would do is I would put a clause in the lease that says it's a 10-year lease, but as soon as the buyer is eligible to purchase the building at fair market value, that the buyer can do that. Okay, so I go to the attorney, I give them the English of what I want, and she goes, oh, I know what you want to do, and she makes it all pretty. So now legally we can notify that seller, let's say 1 or 2 years into the thing, when we do have $100,000, we can now go to the bank and get pre-qualified because I got a tax return and I got the cash. Then we go back to the attorney who put it in and say, hey, I need to execute that thing. Let's contact the landlord and let's purchase the thing. Let's purchase it. So if you don't put that clause in there, you go to that seller and they're not going to want to sell it to you.
Well, and there's that option, but there is also other options because a lot of people don't have that down payment. Usually it's 20%, 25, 15, depending on the bank. You can also do either a lease carryback or a seller carryback. So essentially the seller would carry that 20% down payment. So they would basically loan you that money, and the amount would be taken out of the practice and be given to the bank as a down payment for the property. And then you would pay the seller whatever that 20% or 25% down payment is. And you would have a separate loan with the seller. Or there's also a lease carryback option where you can lease the property for 6 months and then the bank will allow you to refinance, and then you're able to get 100% financing on that building. But it depends on the bank, and it depends on whether the seller is willing to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options that you can do if you don't have that money. And that's why liquidity is super important, because if you have liquidity, chances are you might be able to have that down payment to put on the building if that is something you're interested in. So just keep in mind if you're few years out. Yep.
Really good ideas too. I haven't used those strategies lately, but that's really good. I'm learning from you, Hillary. I'm going to steal some of these ideas and put them into the next presentation. I like that.
That's great. Well,
I got to do it a few times.
Yeah, Hillary, Charles, I'm at 1:30 right now, but I do have one more question. We can keep it maybe short, and I think it's important, particularly in the time that we find ourselves in. It's dealing with the Paycheck Protection Program and the SBA loans. Many practices are applying and obtaining those. How do you see that impacting the sale or affecting the sale of a practice if there's one that has a PPP loan in place and all of that goes with it?
Yeah. So what's going to take place is it's just simple. It's a loan. So if I got $1 million practice and my PPP loan and I'm the seller, and that I've got a PPP loan approved for 120,000, and I get the money, basically that's a loan between me and the bank / the SBA. So I'm on the hook. So no different than if I've got a loan to Patterson or maybe a CAD or a loan to B of A. It's just something that I'm going to have to pay back. So it doesn't really it's not actually going to affect the overall valuation. It's just a loan that I need to have. So you're going to give me money for the practice. The practice is worth what it's worth. And then when I receive the money, I'm going to be responsible for paying that back. So it's not like the buyer is going to buy the corporation and the corporation's responsible. That's not how it works. So me, the seller, if I got a PPP loan, that's my responsibility.
Great.
And the one thing I would just add quick to that is if the seller is hoping to get, because everyone's hope for the PPP loan is that it's going to get forgiven. And obviously from what I've been hearing, that they won't be able to apply for that, or they won't be able to know if it is forgiven until later this summer. So a lot of us have been throwing around the idea of, well, if the seller really feels like this loan is going to get forgiven at some point in time, so they don't want to have to pay it back, we can always put whatever that loan amount is in escrow, on the closing date, and hold it there until we get that verification that yes, it is forgiven, or no, you're going to have to pay back a certain amount. And then that way we can distribute those funds in a way that to make sure that there is no liens or anything on the property because of that piece. That's the one wrench that kind of gets thrown in there. Is everyone thinks it's going to be forgiven, which you don't know.
Yeah. Yes. No. That's we've got over 200,000 hits on our Cane Waters website. With that, we've got a lot of different thoughts and opinions and strategies about how to tackle this this PPP opportunity, but it's not free money.
No, there's some challenges, no doubt. Well, Hillary, Charles, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Great information.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the attendees who took their time to spend it with us today. This webinar will be recorded, or is recorded, and will be available online at a later date. Again, Charles, Hillary, thank you so very much. You guys have a great day.
Okay, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Carmelo. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hillary, good to see you again.
You too, Charles. See you later.
Okay.